Good morning. You may be thinking, where's Eric? He looks a lot different, but it's just me, it's Spencer. But welcome to the penultimate class on Psalms this year. We're going to be covering Psalms 69 and 70 today. For those of you who have not been with us previously, we're asking ourselves 4 questions. What do you notice about the psalm? What do you wonder? Like, what questions do you have? What are you reminded of? And then what prayers can you make for your own life? So, this is the schedule. So Eric should be back next week to finish things out for us. And then this is just a reminder of how the book of Psalms is broken down. Book 1 has 41 Psalms in it. Book 2 has 31. Book 3 and 4 both have 17 Psalms in them. And Book 5 has 44. So we are, like I said, finishing up Book 2 pretty shortly here. And then in the fourth quarter of next year, we will be moving into Book 3 and 4. One of the lenses that we've been trying to use to look at the Psalms is found in Ephesians 5, 18 and 19. It says, "Do not be drunk with wine, for that is debauchery, but be filled with the Spirit, addressing one another in psalms and hymns and spiritual songs." So what are some reasons that someone might turn to drugs or alcohol? Eric asks this question about every time, I think. That's right. You've been listening. Yeah, it's a form of escapism, right? You don't want to deal with your feelings, so you turn to something else. But Paul in Ephesians 5 tells us to go to the Psalms to help us deal with whatever we're going through. And I think today we'll see that David is dealing with some pretty intense emotions. But before we go too much further, let's go ahead and have a prayer. Our dear God and Father in heaven, we thank you for this time that you've blessed us with to come together and to open your word, to see what you've had to say to your people from thousands of years ago. Help us to learn from your word and make changes in our own lives where we see fit. And it's in Jesus' name we pray. Amen. So, before we jump into the text, we normally do a little bit of a summary. So here is the summary. The psalmist cries out for help because he's suffering, and the suffering is being caused by his loyalty to God. The psalmist calls for the judgment of his enemies, and he trusts that God will take care of him and those who serve him. So the outline of the psalm, in this first section, 1 through 4, we have the psalmist is feeling like he's drowning. In the second section here, 5 through 12, he feels like he's dealing with some scorn and some shame. Verses 13 through 21, David calls for God's favor, and then in verse 22 through 28, he calls for judgment of his enemies. And then the final section here, verses 29 through 36, we have a section of praise to God. So let's go ahead and we will read Psalms 69 here. It says, "To the choir master according to lilies of David. Save me, O God, for the waters have come up to my neck. I sink in deep mire where there is no foothold. I have come into deep waters, and the floods sweep over me. I am weary with crying out. My throat is parched. My eyes grow dim with waiting for my God. More in number than the hairs of my head are those who hate me without cause. Mighty are those who would destroy me. Those who attack me with lies. What I did not steal must I now restore? O God, you know my follies. The wrongs that I have done are not hidden from you. Let not those who hope in you be put to shame through me. O Lord God of hosts, let not those who seek you be brought to dishonor through me, O God of Israel. For it is for your sake that I have been borne reproach, and that dishonor has covered my face. I have become a stranger to my brothers, an alien to my mother's sons, for zeal for your house has consumed me, and the reproach of those who reproach you has fallen upon me. When I wept and humbled my soul with fasting, it became my reproach. When I made sackcloth my clothing, I became a byword to them. I am the talk of those who sit in the gates, and the drunkards make songs about me. But as for me, my prayers to you, O Lord, at an acceptable time, O God, in the abundance of your steadfast love, answer me in your saving faithfulness. Deliver me from sinking in the mire. Let me be delivered from my enemies and from the deep waters. Let not the flood sweep over me, and the deep swallow me, or the pit to close its mouth over me. Answer me, O Lord, for your steadfast love is good. According to your abundant mercy, turn to me. Hide not your face from your servant, for I am in distress. Make haste to answer me. Draw near to my soul, redeem me. Ransom me because of my enemies. Ransom me because of my enemies. You know my reproach and my shame and my dishonor. My foes are all known to you. Reproaches have broken my heart, so that I am in despair. I looked for pity, but there was none, and for comforters, but I found none. They gave me poison for food, and in my thirst they gave me sour wine to drink. Let their own tables before them become a snare, and when they're at peace, let it become a trap. Let their eyes be darkened, so that they cannot see, and make their loins tremble continually. Pour out your indignation upon them, and let your burning anger overtake them. May their camp be a desolation. Let no one dwell in their tents, for they persecute him who you have struck down, and they recount the pain of those who you have wounded. And add to them punishment upon punishment. May they have no acquittal from you. Let them be blotted out from the book of the living. Let them not be enrolled among the righteous. But I am afflicted and in pain. Let your salvation, O God, set me on high. I will praise the name of God with songs. I will magnify him with thanksgiving. This will please the Lord more than an ox or a bull with horns and hooves. When the humble see, they will be glad. You who seek God, let your hearts revive. For the Lord hears the needy and does not despise his own people who are in prison. Let the heavens and earth praise him, and the seas and everything that moves in them. For God will save Zion and build up the city of Judah, and the people shall dwell there and possess it. The offspring of his servant shall inherit it, and those who love his name shall dwell in it. All right, so what do you guys, there we go. What do you guys notice in this psalm? Yeah, he, got to catch up in my own notes here. So he feels like he's drowning, right? He's overwhelmed. Anything else? Yeah.
About that drowning thing, if you think back, even the best of swimmers can get exhausted by treading water and constantly. Sometimes we use the saying, I'm just trying to keep my head above water.
Mm-hmm.
So trying to remain steadfast and hopeful is sometimes difficult when your enemies are surrounding you. So I think that's something we can all perhaps identify with, that constant treading,
Yeah.
working towards doing what is right.
Yeah, when there seems like there's no hope, it gets exhausting, right? Yeah. Anything else?
He knows who his help come from.
Yeah.
Save me, oh Lord, you got to help because I'm bad.
Yeah, at the end there he says, you're my help. Yeah, very good. Anything else? This is a lot of information to cover. But one thing about this is a common theme in a lot of David's psalms, being surrounded by his enemies. But one thing that I thought was interesting was that when he's feeling overwhelmed, where is that? It's in verse. Is it verse 9? Let's see here. No, it's verse 7 through 12, so 9 is in there, yeah. His enemies come at him not with swords and bows and stuff like that, but he's being attacked with words, which I just thought was kind of interesting in contrast to what you would normally think someone trying to kill you using weapons. That is true, right? And we've seen that David is betrayed by people that are very close to him with words, Yeah, very good. Right, et tu, Brute, right?
I see some similarities in there with Job, obviously, and he said,
Yeah, for sure. And I think, he's feeling overwhelmed. He says in verse 3, I grow weary of crying out to you, and my eyes grow dim. This seems like this is not something new. This is something that he's been dealing with for a while. He's been continually asking God for help. But it doesn't seem like, so far, God has not been doing anything for him. And I think this sometimes is reflected in our own lives. Sometimes when we're going through something, we ask God for help, and then there's just kind of silence. There's no immediate answer. Do you guys have any thoughts on that? Yeah.
Think about David, he kept on praying. He didn't give up just because he wasn't getting an answer from God.
Yeah. And some people have speculated that maybe this was written at the end of David's life, where he's been continually praying to God all his life, and God has delivered him from a lot of different things. So this time shouldn't be any different. It's just not as immediate as David would like. But yeah, that's a good point. Let's see here. In verse 5, David acknowledges his own sin. He says, "Oh God, you know my folly. The wrongs I have done are not hidden from you." What do you guys have any thoughts on that? I think sometimes, we think that as long as no one else knows what I'm doing, things are going to be okay. But God knows everything that you do, what David is saying here. Nothing is hidden from God, and he knows everything that he's done, even those secret sins. And then kind of going along with that in verse 6, David is wondering, is his sin going to bring reproach on God? In verse 6 it says, "Let those who hope in you not be put to shame through me. Let not those who seek you be brought to dishonor through me." So it seems like David is having some concerns about what he's done in the past, and he's worried that it might cause other people to stumble and look at God in a bad way. You guys have any thoughts on that?
It's a great lesson for us all. We come in here and act so perfect, but before God, he already knows our weak spots. He knows where we are missing the mark at. And if we're going to have help from him, we have to lay it out there bare before him, because as it says in Hebrews 4:12, all things are open to the eyes of him whom we have to do. He sees it all, he knows it all. So if we tell him, then he can help us. But if we go to hide it from the very one that can help us, that's not a way to get help.
Yeah. I think, like you were saying, God already knows it. We have to ask him. It's kind of like, I don't know, maybe you guys aren't the same kind of parents I am, but, if your kid is struggling with something, you're like, I know you're struggling with it, but I want you to ask me for help. But maybe that's a reflection just on me. Any other thoughts on this? I think all of us have known people who have been Christians or have not been Christians, but they see how people who claim to be Christians act, and they see the mistakes they make and the sins they make, and that is causes them to not want to be followers of Christ. And so, like David, I think we should also do some self-reflection, and like Mr. Ross was saying, just lay it all before God, be honest with him about what's going on. Any thoughts on this section? Yeah.
I just think it's interesting how it's separated, where you have something negative, and then there's another section where he's praising God, and then he goes back to something negative where he's struggling, and then he goes back to praising God. So it's like,
Yeah, kind of a little bit of a balance. Yeah, that's a good point. I hadn't noticed that kind of like that, but yeah, that's a good point. Anything else? Okay. All right. So in verse 7 through 12, we see David is enduring ridicule because of his dedication to God. He mentions several things that he's done. He's fasted, he wears sackcloth, and then he's become the talk of the people in the gate. People are ridiculing him. And all of this is because he's been following God. So what do you guys think? Like, what about us? Are we willing to be made fun of because we follow Christ? This is getting a little bit ahead of myself, but this kind of reminded me of in 2 Samuel 6, 14 and 16, where David is dancing before the Lord, and his wife Michal says, what are you doing? You look like a crazy guy. And he says, I'll look even crazier, if it's for the Lord. So David didn't have any problem with being made to look a little more humble than a king should normally look. But do you guys have any thoughts about that? All right. So verse 22 and 28, there seems to be some pretty strong language David is using here. Verse 28, he says, "Let them be blotted out from the book of life, and let them not be enrolled among the righteous." That seems like some kind of strong language. These people are talking bad about him, and he's like, I want them to be destroyed. What do you guys think about that? You have any thoughts? Yeah.
I think he's being honest to God about his feelings, but we already know through the story that he doesn't, act on his vengeance.
Mm-hmm.
So, he wouldn't actually. I guess he did destroy some people, but I'm thinking of Saul. Like, he didn't take the vengeance out on him.
Yeah.
God handled that. So.
Yeah, and I think you're right. I think this is David being honest with his how he's feeling. Like, he's being persecuted, and he's like, you got to do something. I want to do something about this. It's not a promise that he's going to act on it, like you were saying, but he's waiting for God's judgment, whether that's through him or something else. But it looks like he's wanting it to be through some other way. Anyone else? All right. So then, for me, this is the final one that I kind of noticed here. But in verse 35 and 36, kind of ending with this section of praise here, the psalm is looking forward to when God will save Zion, and it says that the offspring of his servant will inherit it. So it kind of seems to be looking forward to a messianic time, when Jesus will come and there will be a new Zion, and we are the offspring of that servant. Anyone else have any thoughts on this section? Anything else you guys notice about this psalm? All right, I do have one last thing, and that is this chiastic structure. There it is. Okay. Oh, you guys, I don't think you can read. All right. Well, sorry about the small print. But so for those of you who are unfamiliar with a chiastic structure, it's where you have statements that mirror each other, and they all kind of converge on a central point. So if you read Psalm 69, you can see some mirroring thoughts here, and they all kind of center on this central point in verses 14 and 15, where David is crying out to God again to save him. Let's go ahead and read that again. 14 and 15, it says, "Deliver me from sinking in the mire. Let me be delivered from my enemies and from the deep waters. Let not the flood sweep over me, or the deep swallow me up, or the pit close its mouth over me." This is kind of the central point of David's psalm here. Do you guys have any thoughts on that? Okay. Oh. So what do you guys wonder about this psalm? anything that you're like, oh, I wonder about that? Yeah.
I'm wondering if there's a strong connection to Jesus in verses 8, where, well, it says, I'm a stranger to my brothers,
Mm-hmm.
an alien to my own mother's sons. So I see that, I'm wondering if that's connected to John 7:5, where he talks about his brothers not believing in him. And then also in verse 21, it says, and gave me vinegar for my thirst. When he was on the cross, he was very thirsty, and they gave Jesus vinegar. I'm just wondering if there's some connection.
I think there's definitely some connection there. I think when I'm reading through this is a very quoted psalm. So yeah, I think this definitely has a lot of looking forward to when Jesus is here. Obviously, those two verses that you mentioned, I mean, I don't know, pretty obvious, right? Those happened in Jesus' life. Anyone else have anything they wonder? So one of the things I was wondering, at what point in David's life was this written? Like, who are these people who he once blotted out from the book of life? And then the other thing I was wondering is, is it okay to feel this way about someone? What do you guys think? I think it's, yeah.
It's kind of a hard question, because David's actually doing it here.
Yeah, right?
At the same time, I think he's putting, as mentioned earlier, he's putting that vengeance in God's hands for that, not his own. So we got to be careful when we wish that on others.
Yeah, and I think, we live in a different time period. We live under the new law. And, this was a different time. We don't have people who are seeking our life. People aren't, I mean, maybe they are to you, but I've never personally encountered that. But I think that we do all have someone who is who's seeking our life. In 1 Peter 5 and verse 8, I think it is. It says, "Be sober-minded and be watchful. Your adversary, the devil, prowls around like a roaring lion, seeking whom he may devour." So there, we may not have someone physical, after our life, but the devil is always looking for ways to catch us and to blot us from the book of life. All right. Anything else anyone notices about this psalm, or anything you wonder about it? So, is there anything that you're reminded of from this psalm? So, if you turn over to John 15, John 15, verse 24. Oops. So verse 4 of Psalm 69 is quoted here. It says, "If I had not done among them the works that no one else did, they would not be guilty of sin. But now they have seen and hated both me and my Father. But the word that is written in their law must be fulfilled. They have hated me without cause," which is what is said here at the end of verse 4. It says, end of verse 4, it says, "Those who attack me with lies," hold on, that's not what I meant. Beginning of verse 4, thank you. "More in number are there those in the hair of my head, and those who have hated me without cause." So that's just a quote from in John 15. And then, which we've already alluded to in John 7, 7 verse 5. Verse 8 says that he was an alien, made an alien to his brothers and the sons of his mother, which, like we were saying, it's hard to ignore that one. We definitely see that there in John 5. John 7, verse 5. And then another pretty obvious one in John 2 and verse 17. Verse 9 is the verse that the disciples remember after Jesus cleanses the temple. Zeal for your house has consumed me. And then verse 9 is also quoted in Romans chapter 15. Romans chapter 15 and verses 2 and 3. It says, "Let each of us please his neighbor for his good, to build him up. For Christ did not please himself, but as it is written, the reproaches of those who reproached you have fallen on me." Let's see here. Yes. So in the psalm, David is saying that he's suffering and he is enduring. What he's enduring is because of his desire to be righteous and be a follower of God. But Paul uses this quotation from the psalm to show that Jesus suffered because of his righteousness. And Paul goes a step further to show how we need to be on the lookout for our neighbor's interests and to be unselfish because that's what Christ did. Any comments or questions up till this point? Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, and that is, I think that's really what God is after when he's asking for sacrifices, is more, something that comes from the heart. Just going through the motions and making the sacrifices isn't really what God's looking for, but he's looking for something more than that. Like David was saying, what you alluded to. Yeah, very good. Anything else? All right. Then in verse 21, let's see here. Another allusion to Jesus on the cross. It's quoted, or not quoted, but alluded to in Matthew 27. When they came to the place of Golgotha, which means the place of the skull, they gave him sour wine mixed with gall to drink, but when he tasted it, he would not drink it. So there's another, I'm just looking forward to Jesus. Verse 22 is quoted in Romans 11. Paul quotes verse 22 of Psalm 69 as a way of indicating that the elect of Israel have received the promise, but not all of Israel did. Let's go ahead and turn over and read that. Romans 11, starting in verse 7. It says, "What then? Israel failed to obtain what it was seeking. The elect obtained it, but the rest were hardened. As it is written, God gave them a spirit of stupor, eyes that would not see and ears that would not hear, down to this very day." And David says, "Let their table become a snare and a trap, a stumbling block and a retribution for them. Let their eyes be darkened so that they cannot see and bend their backs forever." So that is Paul quoting again from Psalm 69. And then in verse 25, Peter applies this verse to Judas in Acts 1 and verse 20. Which says, "For it is written in the book of Psalms, may his camp become desolate, and let there be no one dwelling in it, and let another take his office." So In context, this is after Jesus had hung himself, and the field that he had purchased, they called the field of blood, and no one lived there because he had hung himself there. And so that is Peter quoting from Psalm 69 there. Anything else you guys notice about this psalm? Anything you're reminded of? All right, so what prayers do you think you could make in your own life based on this psalm? Yeah. Yeah, I think that is a good one. A lot of times God's timeline is not our timeline, right? And like we said, this seems to be something David has been dealing with, and he has been patient and continues to be patient for God to respond. Yeah, very good. Anyone else? Yeah.
Seems like it's every day it's just getting harder to live in this world and to be a Christian, to be what God wants us to be, and to cry out to God that you are my help and you'll able me to make it through to the other side, which is the end all be all, is to be in heaven with the Father.
Yeah, for sure. Joanna, did you have something?
Yeah, verse 6, I know we already talked about it, but, our actions do affect the way other people view God. And I know so many people that have lost their faith through someone else's sin. And so I think that's a prayer to make, that what we do, let other people see God more clearly and not
Mhm.
have a bad view of God through us.
Yeah, that's the one I had up there. Yeah, let us be good examples to others. Someone had once described it as you're a window through which God sees, or people see God through you. And if you're kind of like a dirty window, no one's going to be able to see through there to see God. So yeah, excellent point. Anyone else?
Help me to see clearly your word and follow it.
Yeah, that's a good one, because especially when you're being persecuted like David is, people are talking bad about you, it's easy just to kind of give up sometimes, right? Anyone else? All right, and then the last one I had is just to remind us God is faithful and he will deliver us, kind of like you were saying, just be patient, and God will come in his own time. Does anyone have anything else they want to say about this psalm before we move on? All right. So let's go ahead and read Psalm chapter 70, or Psalm 70, I guess it's not a chapter. It says, to the choir master of David, for the memorial offering, make haste, O God, to deliver me. O Lord, make haste to help me. Let them be put to shame and confusion who seek my life. Let them be turned back and brought to dishonor who delight in my hurt. Let them turn back because of their shame, who say, aha, aha. May all who seek you rejoice and be glad in you. May those who love your salvation say evermore, God is great. But I am poor and needy. Hasten to me, O God. You are my help and my deliverer. O God, do not delay. All right, so here's the summary of the psalm. It's a prayer of deliverance from the enemies and a plea for God to act quickly. And then here's the outline here. Verse 1, just a plea for help. Verse 2 and 3 is a call for judgment here. And then verse 4, there's a moment of hope. And then verse 5, another, kind of ends with another plea for help. So what do you guys notice about this psalm, other than it's really short?
In verse 5, David recognizes that he is poor and needy and needs God,
Yeah,
like the Beatitudes.
yeah, and I think that is you know, David is king, right? He's got power and he's got wealth. And he says, I'm poor and I am needy. Both things that, as a king, you would think, why would you need those? You're the king. And yeah, good point. Anyone else? Sure. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, I mean, it's because of God he got to where he was, right? I mean, when Samuel was looking for the next king, he saw, you know, all of Jesse's sons. He's like, is there another one? He's just, you don't want this one. He's the runt of the litter. And you know, that's the one God chose. So yeah, very good. And I think, you know, just thinking about it, it's an interesting contrast between Nebuchadnezzar. In Daniel, Nebuchadnezzar, he goes out on his porch and he says, look at all this stuff that I've done. Look at what I've done. This is all me. I had no help from anyone else, and then God says, you know, well, I'm gonna humble you, and you're gonna be like a beast of the field. And David, instead of going out saying, look what I've done, he acknowledges where his wealth and his power have come from. It's from God, and he's helped him get to where he is. Yeah, Dave.
It seems like there's more urgency.
Yeah.
He says it in the first verse, and then he reiterates it in the last verse.
Yeah, and he says it twice in the first verse. He says, you know, let's see, make haste, O Lord, to deliver me, O Lord, make haste to help me. So, I mean, yeah, he wants it to be like, hurry up, you know, time's a ticking. Yeah, very good. Anyone else?
David learned these lessons well before he got king. When he was a young boy taking care of the sheep. The Lord delivered him from a lion and a bear. He knew where his help came from, and he never forgot it. And that's the challenge for us as we get older, to remember the goodness of the Lord and how he's brought us out so many times.
Yeah, and that's a good point. God was with him since before he was king, right? I guess, I don't know, hindsight is 20/20, but, you know, looking back at your own life, you can maybe see where God has worked to help you get to where you are today. Very good. Anyone else? Anything you guys notice?
It does say, come quickly a couple of times there, and in Revelation 22, Jesus said he's coming quickly, and then John writes, Lord, come quickly.
Yeah. Yeah, it's kind of, you know, when we say our prayers, you know, Lord, come quickly, you know, there's a sense, you know, like what Mr. Ross was saying, the world's getting harder to live in, right? We kind of want God to come and help us quickly. I thought it was interesting, verse 2 and 3, David asks for his enemies to be put to shame. This is an interesting contrast, I think, to the previous psalm where he's asking for them to be, you know, pretty much utterly destroyed. What do you guys think about that? Do you have any thoughts on that? Yeah. 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 Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's. I think it is kind of what you're saying. He's asking them almost to come to their senses. He doesn't want them to be destroyed. He wants them to come to God. Yeah, Dave.
It's as if he's saying, expose them.
I'm sorry.
It's as if he is asking that they be exposed.
Oh yeah, that it becomes exposed. Yeah, Mr. Ross.
I think of when David was hiding out and his son was against him, and Ahithophel gave him the counsel to
Yeah, very good. Anyone else have anything else they notice about this psalm? All right. We already talked about verse 5, David's kind of being humble. And so what do you guys wonder about this psalm? Anything that sticks out in your mind, jumps out at you? One thing I wondered is, like what happened? Like doesn't appear to be any response from God, even though there seems to be kind of an acute kind of situation going on. It's something urgent that David needs taken care of, but we don't, as far as we know, we don't have anything where God responded. And then I did also wonder, who is this person seeking David's life? Some people have speculated that maybe this was written during Absalom's rebellion, which would kind of explain why David is asking for his enemies to be put to shame rather than just to be killed. In 2 Samuel 18 and verse 5, we see it's coming to an end, and David is talking to the commanders of his army, and he says, please deal gently with the young man Absalom. And ultimately, Absalom is killed, or hung by his own hair, but David didn't want him to be destroyed. He wanted him to live and to come to his senses. Anything else that anyone wonders about this passage? All right. So what are you guys reminded of in this passage? One thing that I thought was interesting is this psalm can be found pretty much verbatim in Psalms chapter 40, just the last 5 verses of the Psalms, of Psalm 40. So I just thought that was kind of interesting. It is interesting. Psalm 40 kind of has that section of David acknowledging, his sin and praising God. And this is just kind of short and to the point. But some people have said that, in the heading here for the memorial offering, maybe this was just a snippet of that psalm meant to remind us, recall back to Psalm 40. And then one other thing that I was reminded of is that hymn we sing, Give Thanks, where it says, let the weak say I'm strong, let the poor say I'm rich. Just kind of reminded me of David at the end there saying, I am poor and I am needy. Anything else you guys are reminded of? All right, so what kind of prayers do you guys think you can make from this psalm? One thing that I was thinking of is God to help me with my struggles. We talked about Satan wanting to take our life, but I think this can also be applied just to our daily struggles. Asking God to help us with, whatever we're dealing with, our struggles with our anxiety, and then also to find gladness in God. And then help me to rely on you, like we've already talked about. And Eric will be back next week to finish us out. And thank you for your participation.